There has to be a mind shift change from the top down. And that's tough because it's kind of saying that we've done it wrong so far. We got to do something right. But if you want to survive and, want to grow the business for the benefit of all your employees, you got to make that shift.
People before machines.
Conversations on the chaos of factory automation from Monday morning to the very near future.
An Eclipse podcast.
Welcome to People Before Machines, conversations on the chaos of factory automation from Monday morning to the very near future. I'm Amanda Cupido, a speaker, author, and entrepreneur with a passion for the intersection of technology and humanity. Today, we're discussing finding certainty in uncertainty when it comes to manufacturing in North America. And I know you can't see me, but I'm doing air quotes around certainty there. We will get into all of that with my guest, Kevin Bowers. He is the Association for Manufacturing Technology's Vice President of Research and has more than 25 years of experience in manufacturing across sales, operations, training, and support. Previously, Kevin led research for industrial equipment and field services at TSIA, Technology and Services Industry Association. There, he focused on benchmarking, advisory, and consulting to improve business outcomes for members. Now, I'm excited to speak to him today, especially because he brings a unique blend of technical expertise and experience in actionable research. And fun fact, before we get to meet Kevin, I have to just say he graduated from the University of Illinois with a degree in Japanese and spent several years living and working in Japan. So Kevin, welcome, or should I say yokoso? Yokoso. Did I get it right?
Yeah, very good. Yes, you nailed it. Good job. So thank you very much for having me today.
It's great to have you here. So as I teed up, we're talking about certainty in modern manufacturing, which I feel like is an oxymoron, but it is something I do think that executives cling to, even if they don't want to admit it. So what do you think is the cost of that kind of mindset on a long-term strategy?
Well, everyone loves certainty in any business, manufacturers maybe more so in current climate, but it's a fairly legacy mindset. If you can find it, good luck. But, here at AMT, the Association for Manufacturing Technology, we recently published what we called our manufacturing mandate. And part of the things we talked about there is, we do support a policy certainty for sure, tax, trade, and regulatory as a foundation for, investment in things that help manufacturing move forward. But, it's not really there yet. You hear things in news all the time. But, operationally, certainty is an illusion, right? You need resiliency and agility and all those types of things. But you're never going to eliminate it. But if you understand it and plan for it, you can get through it. So do we want it? Yes. Do we have it? No. So the key is understanding that fact and planning accordingly.
All right, you mentioned resiliency in there. And I know recently there's obviously been a lot of global disruptors, pandemic, geopolitical shifts, inflation, you name it. So curious if you've seen any anecdotes, either from the factory floor or in the C-suite, that really exemplified this resiliency that you refer to.
Well, so I read this phrase in a social media post on LinkedIn recently, but I really liked it, and it was like perfect timing for our talk today. But it's resiliency is not bouncing back; it's adapting forward. And I tried to find out who originally said that, but that was a rabbit hole. But I did really like it, right? And on the factory floor, resiliency it needs to be driven by tech-enabled workforce, right? Automation must be central to this transformation. Robotics can help with consistency and resiliency and performance. So the factory floor, we need to enable our workers, the frontline workers, with tech and automation. But then the C-suite, they need to lead not only by, making the money available, the financial planning for that, but they also have to lead top down with this digital strategy. It can't just be, here's the money, you guys figure it out. It has to be, we want to do this. So they have to put their stake in the ground about the digital strategy, as well as communicate that, give the money to enable that, and as well as align incentives to make the frontline workers and the factory floor incentivized to do so. So, things like digital twins, AI, autonomous systems will help do this, right? But it has this automation and this enablement of the frontline worker has to be core to the resiliency, I think.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about those Industry 4.0 technologies. So we're referring to AI, cloud computing, big data. Do you think they're being underutilized right now?
I would say yes, both from my experience, 20 years in manufacturing technology suppliers where we tried to get our factories to do these things. And, so the tools have existed for a long time. I know AI is at the peak of the hype cycle now, but, in manufacturing, we've had a lot of data and we've been using AI to do predictive maintenance for a long time. Has it
Yeah.
been widely utilized? No, but it's been there for a long time, right? So we have a bit of technical debt. Machines last for a long time, right? So there's some outdated, disconnected machines. So that is somewhat of a barrier to, widespread implementation of automation. But I think, we're finding ways every day to get around that. But I think one issue is the majority of manufacturers are small, medium enterprises. There's I think 85% of manufacturers are these small type companies. So we need to enable them with the right tax incentives and funding to help them do some of this, right? And also, they need to have a kind of a changed mindset, right? If you automate a broken process, you're just going to do a bad thing more bad, right?
Right.
So they have to be a bit flexible in adopting this and being willing to adopt best practices to move forward. So underutilized, yes. Getting easier to utilize better. And I think we should take advantage of this AI hype cycle. Now, if you say AI, magically money appears and you get the ability to try some of these proofs of concepts. So you should do it, right? I mean, have goals and good use cases in mind, but take advantage of it while you can.
Yeah, and you mentioned technical debt. So maybe dig into that a bit more. How can people balance this, experimentation phase with also taking into account that technical debt?
Well, that is a good question. So, recently with a lot of the tax cuts and things that were passed, there's incentives to invest more, and you can depreciate, and there's R&D expense write-offs. So there's a bit of a buffer there for you to invest in a few proof of concepts to make sure they work while you're doing your core job. And that money keeping the lights on and allow you to invest a little bit, but there's, I think, no shortage of manufacturing technology suppliers that would be willing to help, right? They get to see what good looks like across all sorts of these small and medium enterprises, so they can help you with best practices and good use cases. So engage with your suppliers and see what they've done and attend conferences, read things. There's no shortages of webinars or podcasts to listen to while you're on your drive or you're out on a run. Listen to some of these things, not just while you're behind the desk at work. But technology is increasing much faster than some of this technical debt is holding us back. So I think that there's lots of ways to connect equipment and find ways around these problems. You just have to ask and be willing to do so.
Yeah, and I think half of it is a mindset too. We could point to technical debt, but I fear sometimes it's just that going back to it being underutilized and it's being seen as a nice to have rather than foundational.
Mhm.
And so how would you suggest people approach changing their mindset or internally helping others change their mindset around that?
Change management is an often talked about a problem. And we talked about enabling these frontline workers. They have tons of ideas, but those things can only go so far. So if it's not top down from the executive, the C-suite, the CEO, the CFO, the COO, if this isn't top down and talked about all the time, you're going to have kind of a ceiling there is how far you can go. So you'll probably optimize in these little pockets within your company if it's not top down. So we have to get the word out to the ones that hold the purse strings and make sure that they drive the communication and fund the right types of things, and incentivize the people to do the right things, and then magically those strategic plans will work. So we need to make sure that the frontline workers don't be quiet. Don't just wait for the top-down approach to come. Push them. Say, hey, this is what we need. This is what we need, and keep beating the drum. The squeaky wheel gets the grease sometimes. So we have to go at it both sides, but ultimately it will not work unless it comes top down, I think.
Yeah, and so talk about your role and what have you seen personally and what have you been championing?
I lead research here at AMT, so our members have the opportunity to ask us lots of questions about, market intelligence, emerging tech and trend, benchmarking, things of that nature. So we, of late, outside of tariffs and tax type questions, which are top of mind. There's lots of questions about AI, how to use AI in their space, things about automation, what are others doing? What type of things do you see? And, a lot of it comes back to, technology and connectivity. I see a big struggle with some of our suppliers convincing manufacturers to connect equipment to the cloud. There's a lot of hesitancy to do so. But when you think about other parts of your factory, HR, all that data probably lives in the cloud. So
Right.
your personal, your income, your social security number, all these things are in the cloud. But yet we're a bit worried about maybe one part program from one machine that may get out, and so our suppliers need to get better at being able to explain to the right people within organizations, IT-wise, about the connectivity and all the different security measures in place. But once you get that fundamental connectivity done, all this data is going to help you make a whole bunch of very informed decisions, and help with the automation. A lot of automation and AI are fed by data, right? So I think getting past this connectivity huddle and then changing the mindset, but really, I think AI and automation are really questions that our members are asking about quite a bit. And also, I didn't mention, but one of the big thing AMT does is we run the International Manufacturing Technology Show that's every 2 years in Chicago. Huge. Last September, over 90,000 people converged for 7 days. But the next one will be in September of 2026. But there's 4 pillars we're going to talk about. There's AI, additive manufacturing, automation, and then traditional metal cutting. So the 2 of the 4 pillars are this idea of digital manufacturing and automation. So it's very critical to our membership base as well as the larger manufacturing community.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah. And do you pick those 4 pillars based on what members are saying to you, or how'd you even come up with those?
Members, as well as, the beauty of IMTS, it's the two-sided marketplace, right? We have, all of these manufacturers from the large automotive, defense and things to the small 10 or 15 person job shops. So they come and they go and they visit different booths and they scan their badges, and we get to see all the different interests they have. So really, they are the ones that help guide that, right? And obviously, then our members decide, okay, what in our portfolio can we show at the show to implement that? But really, we take feedback from both sides of the market, because ultimately, we want to be able to enable the larger manufacturing community to thrive and grow. So when they show up and go to booths and tell us what they like, we make sure that we align what we show with that.
And I'm just curious how much has changed since your last one last year. This seems to be such a pivotal 2 years. So much has happened. What are some of the shifts you've noticed between the last show and this upcoming one next year?
Well, I thought you couldn't go anywhere and not hear about AI in last September, but even now it's even more so.
Yeah.
So AI forefront, and then, when you think AI, you think, automation on the software side, and then logically you start to think automation on the hardware side. So both of those things are even coming more to the forefront. And then, with all of the tariffs and things, there's this new push for reshoring and making more things here in at least the United States where I'm based. So people are still talking about, we got to go and see what's the newest technology that we can get the biggest bang for our buck for and get the most output from. So it's a combination of that traditional machinery plus the automation, and then this umbrella of AI and digital manufacturing software overhead to put it all together.
Okay, let's dig in on reshoring, because I wanted to bring that up. It's often sold as a path to greater certainty as we talk about finding certainty and uncertainty. But I do think there's pros and cons to that. So what do you think of that as a tactic to help with mitigating risk?
Well, it's certainly much easier to drive 30 minutes down to your supplier to figure out why the casting's late, as opposed to getting on a plane, flying, halfway across the world. So that is, one benefit to it, right? And also, I think that, cutting lead time, just the shipping lead time in and of itself helps in some sort of certainty, because, it gets on a truck. Worst case, it's 2-day drive anywhere in the maybe 3-day drive anywhere in the United States as far as trucking. So we've seen quite a bit of influx over the last, few years of jobs coming back. There's all sorts of, people touting new investments in the United States. GE Appliance said they're going to spend how many billion on making more, dishwashers and washing machines in the States. Apple's going to build more things in the States, all sorts of manufacturer builds. So when all this investment comes in, there's need for more infrastructure, more equipment, and then more people learn about the industry. So there's more draw getting people into the industry. And then, when some of this stuff is new and greenfield, it's easier to implement these newer technologies. So I think it's a nice flywheel effect, right?
Yeah.
Will we ever make everything we need in the United States? Maybe not. But I think it's a good way to, secure some resiliency, protect national security by getting some of this manufacturing coming back, right?
Yeah, the boost of the local economy, it's always nice. I think the flip side to that, though, is the higher labor costs and
Hmm.
potentially shortage of skilled workers. So how
Right.
do you approach that?
Well, so one nice carve out in the some of the tax breaks that were extended is, the 529 plan, which is the plan where you save for college, is traditionally always just for like a 4-year institution. Now it can be used also with trade schools and apprenticeships. So that opens up
Mm,
the for parents and grandparents saving for their college for their kids or grandkids, now that if someone wants to go to welding school or learn about machining, they can apply that money to that too. So that's helpful. So it's not a roadblock, right? So that's good news. And, there's still some of a stigma that a factory is probably a dirty, dark, dangerous place. But if you went into a factory where they're making medical equipment, it's probably cleaner than your house. So I
right.
think, as we put all these newer factories and things, people will see that, man, this is really cool, interesting stuff. And when I was at a member company of AMT before I joined, we'd have open houses where students would come in. They were gung ho. They were ready to go. This is cool. It's like a computer, a game, all that kind of stuff. But the roadblock was they went home and told their parents. Their parents were like, no,
Mm,
no. So it's maybe not the youngest generation that's not interested. It's their parents think with the legacy mindset that it's dirty, dark, dangerous. You don't want to do that kind of stuff. But it's not that way, and it's an interesting alternative than going to college and potentially coming out with some amount of debt. So I think there's a lot of upside. So we just need to partner with local schools and keep beating the drum again that manufacturing is interesting, it's safe, it's a great career path.
right. I didn't even think about that dynamic between students and parents. How interesting.
Mhm.
Um, all right, let's zoom out a bit. I know AMT is global. Do you find in general that North American manufacturers are too focused on control?
That's an interesting question. So for my, before AMT, I worked for two Japanese headquartered companies,
Yeah.
right? So very process oriented controls, Edward Deming and the Toyota product. So they're pretty into control, I'd
Right.
say, right? In
Yeah.
quality. So I would say at least my experience in Japan and, a little, very into control, a little bit America, a little bit not as much, but then Europe always seemed to be pushing the edge of technology and going far. So sometimes because you're always pushing, it's a little bit harder to have the control, but you're willing to take that leap because you're on the bleeding edge. So I think the United States sits in the middle of it a
Okay.
little bit. But also, I was reading a book about kind of the origins of machine tools in the United States, and they were talking about the fact that the reason that manufacturing took off in the States is the U.S. government said that, in all their orders for muskets right after the Civil War, they had to be interchangeable, and that was never done before. So American manufacturers figured out how to do that, and then when that got out at different world fairs, all sorts of other countries, England and stuff are like, oh, that's the American manufacturing system. Repeatable, controllable, interchangeable. It's amazing. So, we started that way. I think it would be nice if we got back to more of that way, but, 100% control, no. But, being agile and resilient and bouncing forward, I think will help us through any of these cyclical, whether it be natural disasters or, geopolitical things or whatever other man-made disruption that we have. Thinking resiliency will be better than, trying to chokehold a certainty out of everything.
Right. And I'm curious to your thoughts about the root causes of this uncertainty. Some of the things you mentioned are external forces, but there's also sometimes internal forces like siloed decision making, fragmented
Mm.
data. So, if you were to compare external versus internal, what would you say the percentage is? Like, what is actually driving uncertainty?
That's a great question. It's easy to blame the external stuff because everyone knows about it. It's very difficult to blame the internal stuff because it's pointing, what's that saying? When you point one finger out, there's like four pointing back at you.
Back at
So
you, yeah.
even if we didn't have all those things, we still have some challenges, right?
Yeah.
Data silos, decision silos,
Outdated
the old,
systems.
yeah, the old saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. That's
Yeah.
a terrible mentality,
Yeah.
right? If that was really true, we'd still have rotary phones. We wouldn't have smartphones, right? Again, change management starts top down, right? And any strategic plan has to have those four things, right? You got to have the plan, you got to communicate it, you got to align incentives, and you got to have the budget. So if people aren't really into it and they take the easy way out, well, I can't control tariffs. I can't control a hurricane that comes through. I can't control a war in Ukraine, and they just do what they've always done. I mean, the status quo has risk in and of itself. So there has to be a mind shift change from the top down. And that's tough because it's kind of saying that we've done it wrong so far. We got to do something right. But if you want to survive and, want to grow the business for the benefit of all your employees, you got to make that shift, right? You can't just do what you've always done.
Yeah, status quo is risky. I like that. So if you were speaking directly to manufacturing leaders, what would you say to them? How can they use these sort of disruptions as catalysts?
Well, what is it? Nishiki says, from chaos comes order. Use these challenges as opportunities, right? We have some of the advantage of all these tax cuts. So there's a little bit, freer ability to invest. So do it and try it. You don't have to change the world with inside your factory. You start small, get some incremental gains, show the benefits, and keep going. I think that innately humans want to grow, get better, enable them to do that, make some small gains, and you'll keep moving forward. Because like you said, it's about the community. If you keep doing the same thing and the factory shuts down, and that's not good for anyone. So,
Right.
thinking a bit of the greater good of the community and, invest and grow and change. And there's no shortage of suppliers that have newer technology and experience for where it did go well. They're willing to help, right? It's not a thing. We always think that suppliers and manufacturers are at odds, right? Beat them down to best price, deliver
Yeah.
just exactly what they said, don't help. No, I think it's really a partnership because everybody wants things to go well and manufacturing to grow in the United States. So treat it as a partnership, not an adversarial relationship. And I think manufacturing technology suppliers can help quite a bit.
Yeah, and celebrating those wins when it does go right. Because I feel like sometimes they just keep moving along, and even just internally sharing those success stories can go a long way.
Yes, I think that, when we do customer satisfaction surveys, we tend to focus on the negative, right? And never not celebrate, oh, I love this service. I love this, all these things. So celebrate the wins is just as critical as doing the root cause on some of the failures. So that's a great point. Celebrate the wins, and
Yeah.
get that news out there.
All right, final question. If you could suggest one bold, no regrets move today for factory leaders so that they can create maybe just a little bit more certainty in their operations 5 years from now, what would it be?
Connect your equipment to the cloud. The data you collect from that equipment is almost more valuable than the equipment itself, right? It'll lead to all sorts of insightful information and help you make better decisions. So, connect it now. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. So connect your equipment.
There you go. I think we leave it there. Any final thoughts on uncertainty in these uncertain times before we wrap up?
Yeah, really. I think, invest in the future, invest in software, invest in automation, invest in robotics. We're not replacing people. We're just augmenting people. There's still a shortage of 400, 500,000, manufacturing jobs. So allow the people you have to do more higher value things and let the things that aren't as high value or a bit risky or whatever be done by, automation and robotics and software so that, we can get the most out of the people we have and then hopefully attract more people because it's even safer. It's, a nice little flywheel, I think.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Kevin. And thank you for listening to People Before Machines, conversations on the chaos of factory automation powered by Eclipse. We're here to challenge the status quo in factory automation because machines don't build factories, people do. The technical producer for this podcast is Ryan Denninger, and I'm Amanda Cupido. If you got something out of today's episode, do us a favor. Share it with a teammate, a plant leader, or anyone who's tired of the automation echo chamber. Be sure to follow this podcast for real talk, bold questions, and sharp insights. And remember, the future isn't fully automated. It's people-powered. See you next time.
Thanks for listening to People Before Machines.
Conversations on the chaos of factory automation from Monday morning to the very near future.
For past podcast episodes, search People Before Machines on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, YouTube, or EclipseAutomation.com.